Excellent. All right, well, I'm glad to hear that. Caitlin, we're still waiting for a few more people, maybe 5.
May I say something?
Please, anybody.
Hi, Connie Martin, this is Esther.
It's really hard to find people on here.
That's okay.
Hi, Esther.
Hi, I think because I'm on an iPad, I can't see everybody. I only see like 2, 4, 6. I only see 6 people, and it doesn't give me like a gallery presentation. So, but I saw you, Connie, and I'm just saying hi. Okay, so hi. I'm going to turn myself off now.
Great. Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone, with the technology. I know this can be tricky. We still have a few people. We'll give a couple more minutes to try to get in, and then we'll get rolling, and they can just join in the middle if needed.
Susannah, do you want my introduction? Your introduction?
Yeah.
Or do you want to jump that?
No, by all means. Why don't you go ahead with that? I don't know if there's a way for me to make you the primary face, but I guess that's not a huge deal. Yeah, sure. It's almost 1:05. You can go ahead.
Can you all hear me? Can you wave if you can hear me? Okay, good. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Stanley. I'm a reference librarian at the Northfield Library, and I am absolutely delighted to have Susannah agree to spend an hour of her time with us talking about her book that was published on September 8th, Everything Elderberry. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Susannah, but she has been a resident here since 2002. She taught English and writing at Macalester, St. Olaf, and Carleton colleges, and she's been a freelance writer since 2015. She's covered health and environmental topics for magazines, some big names like Sierra, Mother Earth Living, Northern Gardener, and Ensia, which I'm not familiar with, as well as blogging on numerous websites. She's passionate about sustainability, growing food, herbal remedies. She has her own website, I think, Healthy Green Savvy, that focuses on practical shortcuts for eco-friendly living. I've looked at it and it's great. Susannah has also served for 8 years on Northfield's Environmental Quality Commission. Thank you, Susannah. And she and her husband Baird and her 2 very precocious, precious daughters live in a 1910 house in Northfield that's run almost exclusively on renewable energy. I see another talk coming on that, Susannah. And without further ado, I will hand her the mic, so to speak. I'm going to mute myself now. Okay. So, and Susannah, take it away.
Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. Just to remind everybody, if you just showed up, best practice is to leave your microphone off until you want to be heard. If you have a question while I'm talking, you're going to need to turn that on and speak loudly. I cannot see your faces once I share my screen, which I'm about to do. I also just want to add a little medical disclaimer. There's one in the book, there's one on my website. I'm going to do it here as well. This presentation is not meant to diagnose or treat any medical condition. Please speak with your own physician for personalized medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on the internet. Okay, so let me share my screen with you, see if I can pull this off correctly. We have a presentation for you with slides. All right, share my screen. All right, nope, didn't want to do that. Okay, here we go. Okay, maybe someone can unmute and say that you can see a picture of a book on a table with elderberries.
Got it. It looks great, Susannah.
Excellent, perfect. Okay, so I just want to start with the question, why a book on elderberries? Because I get this question quite a lot. I've always been fascinated with the ways that what we choose to eat can affect our health for good or for ill. And elderberry has been a go-to herbal remedy for me for quite some time. I'm an avid forager and gardener, and I found what I'd heard about the plant really appealing. When the publisher approached me about writing a book devoted to elderberry, I had absolutely no idea what kind of adventure I was going to be in for. I spent the better part of a year digging deep into the scientific research, poring over dozens of historical texts, interviewing growers and researchers around the world, and a whole summer experimenting with flowers and berries in the kitchen. It was quite a mess. There were always flowers and berries on the floor. I learned there's a lot more to this plant than most people realize. I'm guessing some of you have tried elderberry syrup because you'd heard it was good for curing cold and flu, and we'll talk about this later on. It turns out that elderberry has been used for this and other purposes for millennia, and not just the fruit, but the flower that precedes it. So I'm going to spend about 45 minutes sharing some of the highlights of my research with you. We're going to start at the very beginning with the question, what is elderberry? So elderberry is the common name for the fruit of a plant called sambucus. You've probably, if you've tried elderberry syrup, you've tried the European variety called Sambucus nigra. We have our very own subspecies of plants here in the United States called Sambucus canadensis. And they grow wild around Northfield and a lot of the country. There are also some varieties that grow in the West in drier conditions, Sambucus caerulea. You're going to find them along stream banks, there are hedgerows around the edges of farms, and they're easiest to spot in spring when they're blooming these absolutely gorgeous flowers. They smell wonderful, and if you've never eaten anything made with a flower before, it's kind of surprising. They actually really taste quite delicious as well. So the real question here is, why all the fuss about this plant? It's been getting a lot of press lately. We're going to talk a little bit about its impressively long history of medicinal use. It's been in use for well over 2,000 years. We're going to start with, this is a quote from John Evelyn's Silva from 1664. The elderberry had quite a reputation as a heal-all. He says, if the medicinal properties of the leaves, bark, berries, etc. were thoroughly known, I cannot tell what our countrymen could ail, for which he might not fetch a remedy from every hedge, either for sickness or wound. And this idea of the elderberry as a sort of medicine chest, you can go get dates all the way back to Hippocrates. So we're back now to the 5th century BC in ancient Greece. Hippocrates had a number of uses recorded in his writings for the elderberry and actually the elder shrub more largely, for an astonishing variety of ailments. And he's actually credited with the idea of calling the shrub a medicine chest in itself. So he recommended it for snake bites, intestinal problems, a number of complaints related to female reproduction, and also for dyeing hair. About 500 years later, another Greek, Dioscorides, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, spent many years creating a 5-volume compendium of medicinal plants called De Materia Medica, which was then hand copied and in constant circulation for 15 centuries. So I don't have the picture of the elderberry, but you can get a sense of what this looked like. So people laboriously hand copying the way you could use all of these different plants over the course of several centuries, 15 centuries, as it spread throughout the Roman Empire. The use of the elderberry also spread. And for all we know, peoples there were using it prior to getting these books, but the possibility of using it for a remedy spread through these books. So following the track of elderberry's use actually gives us kind of a history of natural remedies more broadly. When we skip ahead to the 15th century and the printing press, the possibility of disseminating information about these plants then expands dramatically. And in the 16th and 17th century, we see a big uptick in the number of these things called herbals. This is the most famous one, Nicholas Culpeper's herbal. And if those of you remember, prior to the internet, you might have had a big medical guide, a home medical guide. This was sort of the equivalent of that, an herbal reference that if somebody had a stomach ache or somebody had an earache, you could go and look and see which plants would be useful. And in the days before you could just pop out to the drugstore, this is what people did. There weren't synthetic drugs. There were plants that would have been carefully preserved and able to be used as needed when illness hit. In 1633, elderberry got a really big uptick in attention when someone devoted an entire book to it. It was 230 pages long just on how to use the elderberry plant. This kind of sealed its reputation. This is from William Cole's, oh dear, and I can't actually read behind my GoToMeeting control panel. Okay, I'll do my best with this one. William Coles writes, there's hardly a disease from the head to the foot. I do not know what I can do about that. My apologies. If I'm going to read this, I need to move it. Okay. There's hardly a disease from head to foot, but it cures. For besides the virtues I have already mentioned, it is profitable for headache, ravings and wakings, hypochondriac melancholy, falling sickness, apoplexy and palsy, catarrhs, toothache, deafness, want of smelling, blemishes of the face and head, diseases of the mouth and throat, the infirmities of the lungs, hosting, I don't know what that is, hoarseness, pleurisy, etc., plague, pox, measles, you get the idea. It can do pretty impressive things, and this might seem very far-fetched. However, as biochemists have been studying elderberry, we kind of have an understanding of why it got the reputation that it did. They've discovered that the fruit, leaves, bark, and flowers have contained compounds with antiviral activity, diuretic, anti-inflammatory, and laxative properties. So they were found useful in all those situations. They're also helpful against microbes, and may very well have helped with the plague. Those herbals then jumped the pond with the European settlers in North America, who recognized our local elderberry plant and realized they could use it in similar ways, which was confirmed by the Native Americans, who were at that time using it in strikingly similar ways to all those that were in the historical texts from the Renaissance. So Native Americans probably shared some of those ways as well. And they, these are some books I consulted that have a lot of those uses in them. So there's a pretty rich medicinal plant understanding that's recorded in some of these books. During the American Civil War, the elder was used on the battlefield to help with the wounded. And they found particularly infusions, ointments made from elder leaves and elder flowers were helpful for wound healing, for keeping away flies, for eye washes, for fever treatments, and those uses remained in the pharmacopoeias of Britain and the United States right up until the early 20th century. The other uses that these have been put to include clothing dye. So they can turn things with a nice purple color if you use other parts of the plant or other types of berries. You can get all of these beautiful different colors of dyes. The elder wood also has this interesting feature. It has a very soft pith that's easily pushed out of the outer covering, and so it makes a hollow tube, which had lots and lots of different uses. It made for a great musical instrument. It was used ceremonially by Native Americans. And then toys were a common thing made from it. So simple whistles, and then this is from the American Boy's Handy Book from 1882. It's instructions on how to make an elder gun. So a pop gun apparently was a really common thing to make with elder, and this is what it would have looked like when you made one yourself. Okay, so perhaps because of its impressive versatility, its uses medicinally, it inspired a really rich lore around the plant. And in the Book of Herbs in 1903, Lady Northcote tells us that every inch of an elder is connected with magic. I'm going to have trouble reading again. So I'm going to switch my screen so I can read this. Another one of these collections of plant lore. The elder appears to have invariably possessed a certain weird attraction for mischievous elves and witches who are fond of seeking the shelter of its pendant boughs and are wont to bury their satanic offspring with certain Kabbalistic ceremonies beneath its roots. Now, not all of its magic was bad. It had very powerful protective powers and would have been planted near cottages to protect them. This is the elder tree mother. Coming out of a teapot of elderflower tea in a story by Hans Christian Andersen by that name. Some of the more good uses that elder could be put to in folklore. The Russians believed elder trees drove away evil spirits. Bohemians used it to take away fever. The Sicilians think that sticks of its wood will kill serpents and drive away robbers, and the Serbs introduced a stick of elder into their wedding ceremonies to bring good luck. In England, it was thought that the elder was never struck by lightning, and a twig of it tied into 3 or 4 knots and carried in the pocket was a charm against rheumatism. A cross made of elder and fastened to cow houses and stables was supposed to keep all evil from the animals. And that's Lady Northcote from the 1903 Book of Herbs again. There's lots more about the history and lore in the book that gives you kind of a little taste of it. But the real reason that elderberry is getting all of the attention that it is the health benefits. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So why is elderberry enjoying such a vogue right now? Maybe I'll just pause for a second because it's so weird talking so much and not being able to see or hear anybody. Did anybody have a question that they want to interject with? I can keep talking.
Hi.
Yeah, please.
I'm Pam, and I remember reading in a couple places that the red elderberry is not good and the black elderberry is, and I'd be interested in what you have to say about that.
That's great. And sorry, this is Pamela? Yeah, okay. I will get to the section on foraging, but one of the things that comes up with elderberries a lot is its ability to, well, certain parts of the plant anyway, and certain preparations to make you quite ill. And in fact, elderberry was used as an emetic historically because it's so good at making you vomit if it's the right part of the plant. So red elderberries are things that people generally avoid eating. They have been consumed in the past. If they're cooked enough and you're not very sensitive to them, it's something you might get away with, but it's something most people try to avoid. Any other questions before I go back to the presentation?
I have a question for you, Susannah.
Please.
So where I grew up, there was lots and lots of what we'd call Saskatoon berries.
Of course, there are June berries. Yep.
Or June berries. I'd like to know if elderberries, sounds like a silly question, but are there any other relatives? What are the in the plant genealogical tree that are related that we might know of?
Okay, that's up for some debate. So they were originally classified with honeysuckles. They have been reclassified in the last couple decades to be in a group of its own. So they are not related to Juneberries. What are those? I can't even say it. Amanelechir. There are a lot of dark blueberries out there that are not botanically related to one another, and we're going to talk about, say, foraging, because some people assume if it's a little blackberry you can eat it, and that's actually not the case. So botanically speaking, not a direct relation to those, and a really different flavor too if you've ever sampled a raw elderberry. Any other questions, or I'll go back to health benefits? Okay. I'm going to go back to the health benefits. It's so funny because I can't see any of you while I'm talking. It's a little weird just talking at my presentation, but I will go back to this. Okay, So like the Saskatoons and like blueberries, elderberries have one of the absolute highest levels of flavonoids called anthocyanins. These have been shown to reduce inflammation, which is something that is involved in a lot of chronic diseases. They are also believed to combat oxidative stress, which is the state of having an excess of unstable atoms called free radicals. They can damage cells and DNA, which leads to health consequences, including cancer, neurological diseases, and inflammatory conditions like arthritis. There are hundreds of studies on elderberry in the PubMed database, and they are looking at how some of these things work. They do it in a few different ways. One type of study is going to be in vitro. Those are going to be on cells in a lab, which can tell us something about the chemical and biological activity, but not how they work when we eat them or put them on our skin. There have been animal studies, primarily rodents and humans don't necessarily function in exactly the same way or respond to things in the same way. So we have limited ability to extrapolate from those studies. And then there have been some human studies. They're clinical trials. They tend to be small. There are some that are still ongoing. And what those studies have yielded is information on how these berries can help us. They seem to be very helpful for the cardiovascular system. They're linked to a lower risk of having cardiovascular disease. They lower blood pressure and cholesterol in the animal studies that have been done. They're useful for diabetes and metabolic disorders. They have a positive effect on glucose levels and insulin resistance. They're being looked at for their effect on brain health. They help prevent and reverse age-related loss of memory and cognitive function. They also seem to protect from stroke damage. And then they also seem to lower cancer risk and help slow the growth of tumors in the animal studies that have been done. They are probably most famous for their antiviral abilities. In the human trials that have been done, they've been shown to significantly shorten the duration of colds and flu. They do this in 3 different ways, according to some recent work in vitro studies. They can block viruses' ability to penetrate our cells. They can interfere with viral replication if there are infected cells. And they also can stimulate our immune systems. So when people are given elderberry extract, the theory goes, all 3 of these things can happen. So there was a 2019 meta-study looking at all of the extant research on elderberry, and they found supplementation with elderberry was found to substantially reduce upper respiratory symptoms. The effect was larger among cases of the flu than the common cold, but supplementation successfully reduces the symptoms regardless of underlying cause. And then what is less known now, but historically was the more common medicinal use of the plant was elderflowers. And they have benefits of their own. They haven't been studied quite as heavily as elderberries in the modern context. They're rich in antioxidants. They're being looked at as a therapy for Parkinson's, for breast and skin cancer, controlling blood sugar and cholesterol, and also as an antimicrobial. Herbalists use them pretty regularly. They're a go-to remedy for fever, seasonal allergies, as an anti-inflammatory and pain reliever. They're notoriously useful for soothing your throat and coughs. And then they're used externally as a skin soother and eye wash and to reduce swelling. Okay, this is an important part. Cautions and contraindications. When plants are powerful in this way, we need to think about how they might interact with other things. So underlying health conditions are a primary one, especially if you have some of the health conditions that elderberry and elderflower are good for treating. So if you've got an autoimmune disease or you're taking immunosuppressants, you don't want something to stimulate your immune system. Undergoing chemotherapy as well, it's something you would want to think about. There are contraindications because it's a useful diuretic and diabetes medication. You wouldn't want to take elderberry and elderflower if you're also on those, corticosteroids, and something called theophylline, if that's how you pronounce it, which is a asthma medication and something used for COPD. It's also worth knowing that any herb can decrease or increase the absorption of medication, or enhance or decrease the activity of the different drugs. There are no studies, as is the case for most herbs, on pregnant or lactating women, so they're not recommended for them. And then there's a very small number of people who are actually allergic to the proteins in elderberries and might have an adverse reaction to them. I think I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions about that. That was a whole lot of health information thrown at you. Any questions at all? That looks like a no. I'll continue then. Okay, so where to get elderberries and elderflowers? You have three real options. You can buy them, you can forage, or you can grow. If you are looking to buy elderberry syrup, there are a number of options out there and seem to be growing every day, homemade and also sort of giant pharmaceutical company types. They're made with different additional herbs. They're made in different ways. Some are made from fresh berries, some are made from dried berries. There are a whole bunch of different options out there. You can find them on the shelf of all kinds of stores. If you walk into your local drugstore, you're going to find those are appearing more and more. The syrups, also the gummies. Target carries a whole variety of them. I was really surprised to see this one at Target, that Robitussin has gotten on the elderberry bandwagon and now does a natural cough relief and immune booster made with real elderberry, it says. But if you're looking for something local, if you're here in Northfield, Little Hill Berry Farm makes its own elderberry syrup now. They were incredibly helpful when I was trying to photograph plants and talk about what they do with them. And this one is made with fresh berries. And my research would suggest that if you're looking for an elderberry syrup with the maximum amount of the compounds that elderberries are becoming famous for, you're going to get more likely you're going to get those from a syrup made from the fresh berries. You can also make your own from dried berries. And in January, that's what most of us are doing because we don't have access to fresh berries. So you can buy those online dried. It's way cheaper to brew up your own elderberry syrup than to buy little tiny bottles. So that's an option a lot of people choose. You can also get fresh elderflowers. I'm sorry, dried elderflowers this way. Fresh ones are really hard to come by. That's where you want to think about foraging. This is actually a picture out from Little Hill Berry Farm. This is the owner trimming some flowers, which he sells to purveyors of various things made from elderflowers. I'll get to those soon. If you are planning to forage, there are some really basic things to know. You want to positively identify your plant. As I said, not everything with a blackberry is edible, and some of them are quite poisonous. Similarly, there are some lookalikes for the elderflowers that you would want to know. It's not hard to tell them apart when you first get a sense of what the elder looks like, but you use all of the different features, the growth habit, the leaves, the bark, the flowers, and the berries. It's possible you wind up with a plant you really don't want to eat if you don't use all of that. Also harvest respectfully. You need to get permission. You need to leave plenty left for other foragers and for the wildlife, and only take what you'll use. And remember, if you're cutting the flowers, you cut your yield of berries. So every time you snip off one of those flower heads, that's a head of berries you won't have during the season for elderberries. One of the big takeaways of my research was the benefits of growing your own. A lot of people say, well, they're so easy to forage. Why on earth would you want to grow your own? So I found a lot of compelling reasons for that. One of the primary ones is the ease of watching it for ripeness. It is so much simpler to keep an eye on something right outside your window than to trek for a few miles and find they're all green or not quite all the way black, or what happened to me over and over again, that the birds got them all. So you get out there and you miss the ripe ones. These actually aren't all the way ripe and they're what's left. You have to go back the next day. It can be kind of tedious. So you can actually protect from the birds as well, which is helpful. And then those gorgeous flowers not only look great and smell wonderful, they attract pollinators, which is fantastic for your garden. And most importantly, I found that you can find berries that actually taste like something. A lot of our native berries don't. And the cultivars that people have been pulling from wild plants have been bred to have better flavor and higher yields. So I've been ordering plants from people who've been working on this. There's something called the Elderberry Improvement Project down at the University of Missouri, and they've been studying this very carefully. So I have suggestions in the book for which kinds of plants you can get. So I highly recommend growing your own for these and other reasons. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to use them. There are some safety issues here as well. I mentioned that the plant is a powerful emetic if the wrong parts are used. So we're going to talk about safety. We eat the berries and flowers only. The stems have compounds in them that can make you feel really terrible. And it's worth remembering that elder is a food, and to take it in food-like quantities, not megadoses. So sometimes people think if a small amount of something is good, more is better. And that's generally not the case, and you don't want to overdo it. When you're using an herb for the first time, most herbalists suggest starting with 1/4 of the recommended dose. So if you've never had elderberry syrup, you take a tiny little bit and make sure you're not one of those people who's allergic to it. Or have a strong reaction. And lastly, there's a lot more to do with elderberries than make elderberry syrup out of them. There are loads and loads more things we can do. Some of them are medicinal. So you have different options for creating medicinal preparations. You can make elderberry syrup, absolutely. You can make a tea. You can make tinctures. Different solvents are going to extract different things. So water, vinegar, alcohol, also glycerin are all used to extract slightly different compounds. This is a tincture brewing with some fresh berries. This is something called an oxymel, which is a vinegar honey preparation that is very easy to make and is also shelf stable, which is something homemade elderberry syrups often are not unless you add a preservative like alcohol. And it tastes a lot like balsamic vinegar. I really like it. You can also use the elderflowers, either fresh or dried, to make tea. I had a lot of fun experimenting with what other herbs it tasted good with, and one of my favorites was borage. This is a borage elderflower tea. And then there's this fine line between what's medicinal and what's a treat. These are elderberry gummies, which are really yummy, but it's kind of like with elderberry syrup. You wouldn't want to just drink down a whole bottle of it. You also wouldn't want to scarf down this plate of gummies because they're meant to be taken a little bit at a time. Elderberry is considered most effective if you're trying to fight off a cold or the flu, to take little doses frequently rather than a big dose of it. Popsicles would be another one. The line between treat and just something medicinal is kind of blurry. They do make wonderful treats, but also if you have a sore throat and you're trying to get over a cold more quickly, that would be a great choice. Same with lollipops or smoothies. And then I spent a long time looking through historical cookbooks, and I just wanted to pull out a page here. This is a collection of different ideas for how to use elder. And I didn't actually try this, but if you look in the lower left part of the page, you can pickle the elder buds and the tops. These are from a 1723 recipe book that's been transcribed here. Also elderflower fritters and elderflower wine, elderberry wine, and also elder vinegar, which apparently was something you would not be without in a European kitchen centuries ago. So I tried making some of that as well. It's really easy. The elderflower is also used commonly in syrups. It makes a really interesting sweet syrup that then can be used in lots of different things. It can be made into very tasty soda, poured into your favorite cocktail. I used it in a sorbet or an ice cream. Tastes really wonderful. Elderflower ice cream is a pretty common recipe. I tried it in some muffins as well. You can actually put the fresh flowers in your muffins also. And then most famously, elderflower was used in Harry and Meghan's wedding cake. And that's a picture of this, that's what they chose for their wedding. The flowers and the berries can also be used to make various alcoholic products. This is the elderflower liqueur that they make over at Loon Liquors. I spent some time with Simeon Rossi, who showed me how to prepare elderflower liqueur, as he does. And you can make elderberry wine and elderberry, all kinds of different elderberry hard liquors as well. The fresh berries, if you get ones that taste good, can go into muffins or baked oatmeal. That one worked out quite well. A chia jam with some raspberry. And then up in the Twin Cities, Serious Jams has a strawberry elderflower jam that she makes. And I went up and watched her do that. And her recipe is also in the book. You can put some elderberry syrup in all kinds of things. This is a fruit leather. This is a banana ice cream. You can make elderberry pie. And then lastly, you can also use the flowers for skincare. Apparently they're very, very helpful for smoothing and soothing skin. And so there's a recipe there for a salve made with the elderflowers and also one with the elder leaves, which is also a useful external use for the plant. Last thing I tried was elderberry ink. You remember it's a good dye. It also works well as an ink. And that might wrap it up. Does anybody have any questions? Let's see, I should stop sharing my screen now. Is that gonna work? Yes.
May I ask you a question?
Of course, please.
When you say if you're starting it for the first time and you don't know, start with a small dose, what's a small dose? Like if you have the fresh elderberries, what's a small dose? And if you have the syrup, what's a small dose? Or
good question. Okay, so the herbalists I spoke to generally recommend starting with 1/4 of the recommended dose. And if you buy a bottle of elderberry syrup, it's going to usually say a teaspoon to a tablespoon, up to 3 times a day. So I would start with 1/4 teaspoon just to try it. The fresh berries to find out if you're allergic. So the berries generally people suggest cooking them. You can eat some fresh berries. They don't taste like much. There are some questions about the compounds in them not making you feel fantastic. So cooking them is probably a good idea, but I've popped a few fresh berries in my mouth just to try them, and the people who grow them do the same, and it's not a big deal. But if you're having the fresh berries, like I wouldn't eat a whole pie the first time you bake it. Take a little taste and see how it goes. There are this very small number of people who are allergic, and you would want to know that. But this is, again, true of absolutely any herb, not just elderberries. You want to be careful. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a question. We'd like to make elderberry jelly from wild foraged berries.
Mhm.
And maybe if we start growing them in our garden from cultivated ones as well. But right now, how's the best way to, number one, extract the juice? Number two, do we need to cook the juice? And then making the jelly, we can follow the recipe on a sure gel, something like that. But what's the best way to extract it? We tried it one time a long time ago and it was terrible because we didn't do it right.
I wonder what you did wrong.
I think we left the stems in, on the berries.
And then we squeezed the bag. So
we squeezed it, to get all the juice out. And I think that...
Okay, so definitely de-stem, because there are things in there you don't want to eat. And also I hear it tastes bad if you do that. I'm not a jelly maker myself. There are some good recipes on the web that you could find out. The real pros with elderberries use something called a steam juicer. But if you don't want to invest in one of those, that's totally fine. They're not terribly expensive. I looked up some of them, but it extracts the juice and leaves everything else behind. So they find it more effective and more efficient. But
can you drip them like you would do with grapes?
Put them in a bag.
The other thing that I've seen recommended in this case would be to put them in the freezer first, because they're going to release their juice more easily. Don't cook them with much water at all. But then you should be able to use a jelly bag after that.
Okay.
Yeah, but so it tasted terrible, or you just didn't get enough out of them?
Well,
It was
very,
bitter.
very bitter.
Bitter, that's the stems.
We got, like we had too much tannic acid in it or something possible from the stems.
Okay.
I remember
It's what kind of
when my
taste?
mother made it, she would have the jelly, the juice would be cooked. You know, she would extract it by heating it and then put it in a jelly bag, let the jelly juice drain out, and then she made jelly with it. But exactly the recipe, you know, we can find a recipe for the jelly, but we just have to extract the juice properly to get it out right.
Right. So freezing should help. You may need more berries than you think because you're used to more substantive berries like blueberries or grapes. So you need a lot in order to get the juice you require. That's the only other thing I can think of. But if it tasted really bad, so they don't have a lot of natural sugars. So you may need more sweetener than you're used to. Again, following a recipe there would really help.
Can
Yes.
you freeze the berries and then make the jam or whatever you're going to do with them, the syrup, like in the winter in January, but use frozen berries instead of freeze-dried berries?
Yes, you absolutely can do that. They lose their the compounds that we're after in elderberries tend to degrade over time in the freezer. It's actually a pretty nitpicky study looking at the different varieties and how many months it took for them to lose, you know, X percentage of anthocyanins and that sort of thing. But most of us, I think, probably don't care level of specificity. So yes, if you have berries and they're frozen, that would absolutely work.
I have a question about that. As far as those little stems, I tried some, I just cannot get, and freezing them is even harder to get those little stems out of there. How important is that and how do you do it?
Okay, so it depends. The importance depends partly on who you talk to and partly on which plant it is. So the studies on our local native elderberries in North America suggest that most of our plants have far lower levels of, so a lot of people are under the impression that elderberries are poisonous. They have something called a cyanogenic glycoside in it that is in a lot of different foods. So they're in almonds also and all kinds of other things. And the European plants have higher levels of the berries are negligible enough that most food scientists think it's not worth worrying about so much. So if you have our native plants, you probably have less to worry about with the stems. But as the Martin's already mentioned, it's going to make things not taste as good. And then the easiest way to get them off, that also depends on who you talk to. So there are different methods out there. Freezing them first with the stem, some people swear by it and some people say it winds up having too much on the stem. And some of that variation might just be about the plants. They may be working with different plants because they act differently. And different varieties are going to be easier to destem than other ones. So the other thing I've seen is whacking the bunch of berries against a big bucket, and so only the ripe ones fall off. There are also some suggestions to, if you submerge the berries in water, you'll get the less ripe berries and the stems on the top, and you can skim it, and it'll make it much easier. But it's a process. If anyone wants to email me afterwards, I can send links to some of the kind of nitpicky videos about these subjects if you're interested. There's a real devoted grower in Missouri at River Hills Harvest who has some videos on YouTube that might be educational if you really want to go down that rabbit hole.
May we go back to the Martins talking about the jam? Is it more beneficial to keep the skins? Like if you just steam it, you're straining out like everything else, right? You're just like steaming the juice out, right? Or do you get the nutrition out of the skin? Like, is it good to keep the skin in the preserves?
That's a great question, and I think that's up for debate. Some people are sensitive to the compounds in the skin and the seeds, and they're going to do much better with the jelly. You're going to get more fiber and potentially protein in a jam because you're going to leave those things in. I don't think you need to split hairs too much about that. If you like eating the whole berries and I agree with you, you can go for it. And if you prefer a jelly, you can do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Yeah, Catherine.
Did you talk to any of the growers about where to get bushes and how to plant them and take care of them? Do you have any references on that?
Yes. So I interviewed a number of different growers to find out about the different cultivars that they were recommending. I actually have an article coming out in Northern Gardener that's recommending particular varieties just for the Northern garden. There's growing information and planting information in both the book and the article. Are you wondering some particular sources for purchasing?
Yes, and whether to do it in the fall or the spring. Very basic.
Okay. So they can be hard to get. The most common way people get elderberries is through cuttings, which the growers take in winter, and so they're just sticks. They just look like little bits of stick. And elderberries have this neat capacity to just kind of root from a cutting. It's one of the reasons they were planted by grave sites. You could just take a stick, put it in a grave site, and it would grow. So if you get those, you tend to order them in wintertime. They arrive according to your climate, sometime in March probably, and then you can root those. You can buy the plants potted locally. They sell a few varieties, not necessarily the ones I would recommend, at local nurseries. So it's a question of how you want to plant. So you could plant in fall, you could plant in spring. If you want to go get one right now, I can't remember if you're one of the people in Northfield, but Connects has a few of them. They're ornamental varieties and other varieties as well. So getting a potted plant shipped to you isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. There are a bunch of online options though as well. I got a couple from Hertz Gardens.
How do we get your email if
let's see. So I think maybe here. So I do have, let's see, I think I had another slide. I'm not sharing my screen right now though, am I? So I will pull up my slide with that. Let's see, share. Is that working? Play. Okay, so that is my web address and my email, but I don't know if the library could send something out with this information and a link to where you can buy the book if you'd like to. Is that something that's possible, Jamie or Caitlin?
Possible.
Yep. If you registered for the program, then we've got your email address, so we can certainly send that out to that entire list of people that registered. Yep.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, so I'm going to get off of there again, stop sharing my screen. Go back to your faces. There you are. Okay.
Susannah?
Yeah.
Does it also matter that if you've got elderberries and they're near like a parking lot or near like, the street, like you wouldn't want to forage those, right? Because they'd have exhaust and pollution and like it's better to forage where there's no cars and stuff, right?
Well, you can try. I tend to think, so I would avoid the railroad tracks where I know they spray. Car exhaust, I actually did some research on that for an article a couple years ago, and the people who follow that kind of thing up in the Twin Cities, researchers suggest that car exhaust landing on our plants is actually not that big a deal, though I tend to prefer it after a good rain, but you're going to wash them. I wouldn't worry tremendously about contaminants. I would worry more about pesticide spray. If you're trying to get something really healthy, getting something doused in chemicals probably isn't a great idea. So if you're foraging, there are options that are by streams or around the edges of farms that you might have well, organic farms anyway, that you might have more luck. Those of you who live in Northfield, I find there's crop dust on our things in our yard all the time. So I feel like the idea that you can avoid all chemicals somehow is pretty much impossible. You know, we're getting whatever pesticide residues are happening from area corn and soybean harvests. So how much you can get a really clean berry, I would say, is up for debate a little bit. But yes, I mean, find the cleanest place you can. But again, I wouldn't worry too much about splitting hairs on something like that. We don't live in an unpolluted world. It's kind of impossible to avoid.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions?
I have a question, and this is going to reveal my level of ignorance about foraging, but I used to live in the country, and all along the roadside in the ditches were plants that looked like elderberries, but I think they were toxic if you touched them. And I can't remember the name of them.
That sounds like, okay, so let's see. There's wild parsnip that grows around here.
Wild parsnip, and that stuff that's bad.
Giant hogweed is bad news too. That might be another one. There are a bunch. The sort of white umbel flowers. If you've got the wrong kind, if you look at the pictures online, I actually have a post on my blog devoted to this, but if you look at the pictures online and you start to really pay attention to the flowers, you can see how different they are. An elderflower is really easy to spot and identify, and it's different in the arrangement of how the different parts of the plant.
Yeah, it looks like the heads are denser.
Yeah, they're just absolutely covered with hundreds and hundreds of these tiny little blossoms. They're really lovely.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? If you have other questions at a later time and want to shoot me an email, I'm happy to answer those. Anyone who wants to stay around and chat more, that's fantastic. And if you have other things to do with your afternoon, I hope you go have a great day. Thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susannah, for this great program.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Congratulations for launching the book.
Oh my goodness, is this, I see Alice Jones. You are somebody I spoke to. She's one of the food scientists and she specializes in smell. I did not realize you were here.
I kind of crept in a bit late.
That's wonderful. Oh, how delightful. I'm happy to meet you. It looks like maybe you've been cooking.
Yes, I'm literally cooking some dinner right now. So yeah. But I didn't want to miss it. So I've literally got my laptop in the kitchen and right next to the stove.
That's fantastic. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for joining us. That's really fun to see you.
Yeah, no problem at all. No, I'm looking forward to getting hold of a copy. I'm hoping it's going to be, is it on Amazon?
It is, yes. It's on Amazon. And
so I can get it internationally then.
That is fantastic. Thank you. How did you even find this? How did you find that we were doing this?
Oh, I just follow anything that's to do with elder and elderberry, as you know.
Oh, so you're on the Facebook group.
I think it was the Facebook group.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was that one. Yeah.
Oh, what fun! That's great. I'm so glad to know you're there. Great. Well, thanks for joining us. Have a lovely dinner.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jamie and Caitlin.
You're welcome. It was a delight. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll send you those links.
Thanks, Susannah. Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Have a great day.